Now let's start with today's story. Growing up in a small town just outside of Chicago, I always thought my family was my rock. We weren't the type to leave things unsaid or go for months without talking. My brother Chris and I were close in that competitive, two boys under one roof kind of way. He was a year younger than me, and we were always compared to each other. He was the charming, free-spirited one, while I was the more calculated, planning type. Our sister Jane, the youngest, was always the baby of the family and our mom's shadow, soaking up every bit of attention she could get. Our parents, Susan and Brian, were typical Midwesterners. Mom ran the household with an iron fist, and Dad was the laid-back jokester who loved grilling steaks as if it were his life's purpose. I thought I had everything figured out: stable family, siblings I could count on, and a fiancée who I believed was my soulmate. Linda came into my life during a group project in my junior year at UChicago. She had this magnetic energy that drew everyone to her. Ambitious, confident, and ridiculously attractive. I fell for her fast. By the end of the semester, we were a couple. It all felt like a whirlwind, but it never crossed my mind to question it. It seemed perfect. I imagined our future together. Careers, kids, everything. One November evening, I proposed to her. It wasn't some grand gesture, just the two of us on a crisp autumn night. She said yes, and we began planning our wedding for the following summer. It felt like the start of the life I'd always dreamed of. And then, everything came crashing down in March. I had a slow Friday at work, so I decided to surprise Linda with her favorite takeout and spend the evening together. When I walked into our apartment, something immediately felt off. Her shoes were by the door, but the place was eerily quiet except for faint laughter coming from the bedroom. I tried to brush it off, thinking she might be on the phone or watching a funny video. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When I opened the bedroom door, my world shattered. There they were, Linda and Chris, tangled up in bed. Linda was wearing the oversized t-shirt I had given her for Valentine's Day, the one with the cheesy heart print. It didn't take long to piece it all together. They froze, both of them looking like deer caught in headlights. It's funny how silence can speak volumes. Chris, my own brother, had the nerve to say, "It's not what it looks like." I just stared at him, almost laughing at how ridiculous it was. Linda didn't say a word. She scrambled to cover herself with the blanket, as if that would erase what I had just seen. I didn't yell, didn't ask questions. What was the point? The evidence was right there in front of me. I looked at Linda and calmly told her, "Pack your stuff and get out." I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose it. Chris tried to mumble something about how it just happened, but I cut him off. "You're dead to me." I wasn't interested in hearing his excuses or fake remorse. It just happened when it comes to sleeping with your brother's fiancée. I walked out. I didn't wait for an explanation or a pathetic apology. I grabbed my keys and drove to a friend's house that night. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the reality of it all sunk in. My fiancée, the woman I planned to marry, and my brother, someone I trusted, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. It wasn't just about the cheating. It was the fact that they had both actively chosen to destroy something I valued so deeply. The day after I caught Linda and Chris, I didn't think things could get worse. But of course they did. While I was at work, Linda moved out of the apartment. I had already told her to pack up and leave, so I thought that was the end of it. But when I came home that evening, there was a note on the counter, right where we used to keep a framed picture of us. It was short, but not sweet. She wrote that she had fallen in love with Chris and never meant to hurt me, followed by some nonsense about hoping I could find it in my heart to forgive them. She had the audacity to finish it with, "I hope you can still be happy for us one day." Happy for them. I wanted to laugh, but it wasn't funny. It was infuriating. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. There was nothing left to say to her. The apartment felt empty without her things, but I didn't care. I just wanted her out of my life as fast as possible, and now she was. My family found out what happened within a few days. I didn't tell them, but I guess Linda or Chris spilled the beans. My mom, Susan, called me immediately. She was furious, not at me, but at Chris. She kept saying how she couldn't believe her own son would betray me like that. "He's not welcome here," she kept repeating. At first, it felt good to have her on my side, but I wasn't naive enough to think it would last. My mom's loyalty had always been conditional. She prided herself on keeping the family together, even if it meant sweeping huge betrayals under the rug. I figured it was only a matter of time before she started defending Chris. My dad, Brian, was different. When I finally answered one of his calls, he didn't say much, just sighed and said, "Well, I guess things like this happen sometimes." I couldn't believe it. He wasn't angry, upset, or even surprised. He treated it like Chris had spilled coffee on my shirt, not like he had destroyed my relationship and shattered my trust in him. Jane, my younger sister, tried to be supportive, but I could tell she was torn. She called to check on me and say she couldn't believe what Chris and Linda had done, but I could hear the hesitation in her voice. She was caught between me and the rest of the family, and it was obvious. For weeks, I ignored most of their calls. I didn't have the energy to rehash what happened or hear excuses about why I should let it go. Instead, I threw myself into work. It was the only thing that kept me grounded. My boss, Kevin, noticed I was putting in extra hours and asked if everything was okay. I didn't tell him the full story, but I admitted I was dealing with some personal stuff. That's when he mentioned the Pittsburgh office. Apparently, they'd been struggling to find someone to lead the team there, and Kevin thought I'd be a perfect fit. It was a promotion and a chance to get away from Chicago, far away from Linda and all the mess they had created. I didn't hesitate. I told him I was interested. When I informed my parents about the move, my dad simply said, "Good for you. A fresh start might be exactly what you need." My mom, on the other hand, acted as though I'd announced I was relocating to the moon. She cried and begged me to reconsider. "What about family dinners? What about Christmas? You can't just leave us behind, Logan," she pleaded. I told her I wasn't leaving them behind. I was leaving Chris behind. "He's not part of this family anymore," I said firmly, but I didn't believe her. My mom has a knack for saying one thing and doing the exact opposite when it suits her. By July, my gut feeling was confirmed. Chris was back in the house. My mom called one evening, casually dropping that they had decided to let him come home for a while because he had nowhere else to go. She acted like it was no big deal, as if she wasn't inviting the person who had betrayed me into her home while still expecting me to show up for Sunday dinners. I didn't even try to hide my anger. I told her it felt like a slap in the face that she was choosing him over me. She tried to justify it, saying, "He's still my son. I can't turn him away." I snapped back, "Well, he's not my brother anymore, and I want nothing to do with him." That's when she started her family unity campaign. She went on and on about how we needed to heal and move forward as a family. It was all code for just forgiving Chris so she wouldn't feel guilty about letting him back in. I wasn't having it. I told her plainly that I wasn't interested in healing or pretending things were okay. Family unity? Then maybe stop rewarding the person who tore everything apart, I said before hanging up. After that, I kept my distance. I was busy preparing for the move to Detroit anyway. I found a place, packed up my apartment, and started fresh in a city where no one knew my family or my past. Leaving Milwaukee wasn't easy. I had good memories there, and part of me felt like I was letting Chris and Linda win by leaving, but staying would have been worse. Every street, every restaurant, every shared memory, it all reminded me of what I'd lost. Moving was the only way to truly start over. By the time I left, I had all but cut ties with my family. I wasn't answering their calls or responding to their texts. Even Jane's attempts to stay neutral didn't matter anymore. They had made their choice by letting Chris back in, and I had made mine by leaving them behind. I didn't know what the future would hold, but one thing was clear. I was done being the good son who always put family first. From now on, I was putting myself first. It was time to rebuild on my terms. By September, I had settled into my new life in Detroit. Cutting ties with my family had been the best decision I'd made, even if it hadn't been easy. Work was going well. I had started to make some new friends, and the distance from all the chaos was exactly what I needed. Then, my mom, Susan, called me. Her birthday was coming up, and she wanted me to come home to celebrate. I hesitated. My relationship with her had been strained ever since she let Chris back into the house, but she kept pushing, saying it would be just the immediate family and that she missed me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The drive to my parents' house was long, giving me too much time to second-guess my decision. I told myself I was doing this for my mom, even though she had disappointed me. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if it was just her, my dad, and Jane. When I pulled up to the house, I immediately knew something was off. There were way too many cars parked outside. My stomach dropped when I saw Chris's car in the driveway. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I debated turning around, but I didn't want to give my mom the satisfaction of bailing. I decided to walk in, keep it short, and leave as soon as possible. As soon as I stepped through the door, my mom greeted me with a big smile, acting like nothing had ever happened. "Logan, I'm so glad you came," she said, pulling me into a hug. Her energy was over the top, like she was trying to smooth things over with sheer force of will. I glanced around the living room, and there they were, Chris and Linda, sitting on the couch like they didn't have a care in the world. Linda even had the nerve to laugh at something Jane said. I stood there, frozen in disbelief. "Why are they here?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. Before my mom could answer, she grabbed my arm and ushered me further into the house. When we got to the living room, my mom began her usual spiel about family healing. She sat me down and launched into a speech about how Chris and Linda had made a mistake but were truly sorry, and that it was time to move forward as a family. Chris, ever the shameless one, chimed in with, "I'm sorry, man, it just happened," as if it were the equivalent of spilling coffee on me, instead of destroying my life. Linda followed up with, "We never meant to hurt you," but it sounded even more ridiculous coming from her. She wasn't even trying to look remorseful. I stared at them, trying to understand how they could believe their own lies. The fact that they thought this was fixable was almost laughable. I leaned forward, looked Chris dead in the eye, and said, "You're a pathetic excuse for a brother." Then, I turned to Linda and said, "I hope he cheats on you too and gives you herpes. I know for sure that if he doesn't, you will for sure cheat on him. You deserve each other." The room went dead silent. My mom started to speak, but I didn't give her a chance. I stood up, looked her square in the eye, and said, "Enjoy your golden boy. Don't call me again. This family of yours is dead to me." As I walked out, I could hear my mom trying to calm everyone down, saying something about how I'd eventually come around. Chris didn't say a word, and Linda just sat there. I got into my car and drove off, not looking back. My mind was racing. How could my mom think this was okay? How could she expect me to forgive and forget, as though this were just some minor disagreements instead of a betrayal that shattered my life? I spent the rest of the day trying to cool off, but the anger wouldn't leave. I kept replaying the scene in my head, wishing I had said more. Part of me wanted to call my mom and let everything out, but I knew it wouldn't matter. She had already made her choice when she let Chris and Linda back into her life. That night, I blocked her number, and Chris's too, even though he hadn't reached out in months. I figured it was only a matter of time before one of them tried to clear the air again, and I didn't want to deal with it. For the next few weeks, I kept to myself. Work became my escape, and I threw myself into every project I could find. My coworkers probably thought I was just really dedicated, but the truth was, I didn't know how else to channel my frustration. I stopped checking social media too, because seeing photos of my family would only remind me of what had happened, and I didn't need that kind of negativity. I told myself I was better off without them, but it still stung knowing the people I once trusted most had let me down so completely. Eventually, I started to feel better. The distance was helping, and I was slowly rebuilding my life. I told myself I didn't need them, that I could create my own version of family with people who actually cared about me. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. My mom wasn't the type to give up easily, and I had a feeling she'd find another way to drag me back into the drama. For now, though, I was content to keep my distance and focus on myself. Let them have their family unity. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who didn't value me. If they wanted to live in denial about what Chris and Linda had done, that was their choice. I wasn't going to be a part of it. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. I was done letting them dictate my life. From now on, I was living on my own terms. By January, life in Pittsburgh had become everything I hoped it would be. It felt good to be miles away from the chaos my family had created. I wasn't waking up every day angry anymore. I had space to breathe, think, and focus on myself. That's when Sarah, my distant cousin, slid into my messages. I barely knew her. We'd only met a few times at family events, and I don't think we'd ever exchanged more than a few words. So when she messaged me out of nowhere, saying she was moving to Pittsburgh and could use some help settling in, I was skeptical at first. I debated ignoring her message entirely. My family had proven time and time again that getting involved with them, even peripherally, was a mistake. But part of me felt bad. Sarah hadn't done anything to me personally, and she might not even know the full story of what had gone down. Besides, she seemed genuinely nervous about moving to a new city alone. Against my better judgment, I agreed to help her. The weekend came, and I showed up at the address she sent me. It was a small apartment complex in a quieter part of town. As I pulled into the parking lot, everything seemed normal, until I saw the U-Haul truck and two very familiar figures unloading boxes, Chris and my dad. For a moment, I froze, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My first instinct was to back out of the parking lot and never look back. But before I could, the front door of the apartment opened, and out came my mom. She spotted me immediately and waved, as though this were some sort of family reunion instead of a trap. "Logan, wait," she shouted, jogging toward my car. I put the car in park but stayed put, not taking a step closer. "What is this?" I asked, gesturing to Chris and my dad standing by the truck, looking awkward. My mom flashed that same tired, let's all be reasonable look, starting her usual spiel about how Sarah just needed help and how it made sense for the family to come together. It was obvious this wasn't about Sarah at all. It was about forcing me back into their toxic cycle of reconciliation. Chris, ever the expert in fake apologies, stepped forward with tears already gathering in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Logan," he said, his voice trembling as if he were auditioning for a role. "I know I messed up. I just want to fix things." I stared at him, unmoved. His words were a rerun of the same pathetic script he'd tried at my mom's birthday party. Then, my dad joined in. "Logan, come on," he said, his voice dripping with that condescending tone he always used when he thought I was being unreasonable. "You're holding on to this grudge, and it's tearing the family apart. Be the bigger man." That was it. Hearing him say that, as if Chris's betrayal was some minor mistake I should get over, sent me over the edge. He had no idea what it felt like to be stabbed in the back by your own brother, to lose not just a relationship but the trust you had in the people closest to you. When my dad stepped closer and put a hand on my shoulder, I didn't think. My fist connected with his face before I even realized what I was doing. The sharp sound of impact rang out, and for a moment, everything went still. My dad stumbled back, holding his jaw, eyes wide in shock. Chris looked like he wanted to sink into the ground, and my mom, predictably, burst into tears. "Logan," she sobbed, as if I were the one ruining everything. Chris muttered something under his breath about me going too far, but I didn't even bother responding. I turned and walked away, my footsteps heavy as I headed back to my car. "Don't follow me," I called over my shoulder. When I got home, I blocked Sarah's number without hesitation. I didn't care if she was part of the scheme or just an innocent pawn. Either way, I wanted nothing to do with her. That night, I sat on the couch, trying to process what had just happened. I wasn't proud of losing my temper, but I didn't regret it. My dad had crossed a line, and if it took a punch to get them to understand that I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore, then so be it. What stung the most was how unsurprising all of this was. My mom had always been willing to forgive Chris, no matter the damage he caused. My dad cared more about maintaining peace than confronting the real issue. I wondered how long they'd been plotting this. Had they been talking to Sarah for weeks, convincing her to reach out to me, or was this just a last-minute attempt? Either way, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had walked away before they could drag me back in. The next morning, I woke up feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief, because I'd stood my ground. Sadness, because it was another harsh reminder of how far my family had fallen. There was no fixing this. They refused to see Chris and Linda's betrayal for what it was, and they never would. So, I made the decision to cut ties even further. I wasn't going to give them any more opportunities to pull me into their mess. By December, I was in a much better place, emotionally and mentally. Life in Pittsburgh was steady. I'd started dating Kelly, a 24-year-old woman who quickly became my rock. She was kind, funny, supportive, and, most importantly, she respected my boundaries. She knew about the mess with my family and never once pressured me to reconnect. When she invited me to spend Christmas with her family in Bay City, I was genuinely looking forward to the holidays for the first time in years. Her parents were warm and welcoming, her siblings were great, and there was none of the drama that had always plagued my own family gatherings. A week before Christmas, I received an unexpected letter. At first, I almost disregarded it because I didn't recognize the handwriting. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was from my mom. She wrote that Chris and Linda had gotten married and that my parents were now separated. She didn't give many details but kept emphasizing how much the family needed me this Christmas. She begged me to come home, hoping it could be a chance to heal and move forward. I read the letter twice, trying to figure out if this was truly about me or just another attempt to fix the mess Chris had caused. The mention of their marriage made me feel sick. It was like a slap in the face, a reminder that they had moved on without a shred of remorse. When I showed the letter to Kelly, she suggested I let it go. "You don't owe them anything," she said gently. "If it's just going to hurt you, there's no reason to put yourself through that." She was right, but a small part of me still felt guilty, not for cutting them off, but for the sense of obligation my mom always instilled in me. In the end, I decided to spend Christmas with Kelly's family. They lived in a cozy house in the suburbs of Bay City, and as soon as we arrived, I knew I'd made the right choice. Her parents greeted me with warm hugs, and her mom immediately started asking whether I liked hot chocolate or mulled cider better. It was simple, wholesome, and unlike anything I had experienced in years. We spent Christmas Eve decorating the tree, baking cookies, and playing board games. It was the kind of holiday I had always wanted but never really had. For once, I wasn't waiting for an argument to break out. Christmas morning was just as peaceful. Kelly's family had a tradition of opening presents in their pajamas, and they even had a stocking for me with my name on it. It was thoughtful, simple, and made me feel like I truly belonged. But even amidst all that warmth and happiness, my family lingered in the back of my mind. I wondered what they were doing, whether my mom was sitting alone at home, if my dad was celebrating at all, or if Chris and Linda were pretending everything was fine. I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the moment. I wasn't going to let their drama ruin this for me. In January, just as I was settling back into my routine, I received an email from Jane. I hadn't heard from her in months, so it was a surprise to see her name in my inbox. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Jane wrote that my dad was now living in a motel, and Chris and Linda were struggling financially. She didn't go into detail but hinted that Chris's job situation was unstable and that Linda was unhappy in their marriage. I stared at the screen, trying to figure out why Jane thought I needed to know this. Was she looking for sympathy? Did she expect me to swoop in and fix things? If so, she was going to be disappointed. I didn't respond to the email. What was I supposed to say? Sorry to hear that, but it's not my problem. I wasn't about to get dragged back into their mess, no matter how bad things got for them. They made their choices, and now they had to live with the consequences. Still, a part of me felt vindicated. They were struggling, and while I didn't take pleasure in their suffering, I couldn't help but feel that karma was catching up to them. Chris and Linda had destroyed my life, and now their perfect little bubble was starting to crack. Kelly noticed I was quieter than usual that evening and asked if everything was okay. I told her about the email, and she just nodded, her expression soft but firm. You've done the hard work of moving on, she said. Don't let them pull you back in. She was right. I had spent too much time rebuilding my life to let their problems derail me now. Whatever was happening with my family wasn't my responsibility anymore. The next morning, I deleted Jane's email and blocked her address. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I wasn't going to let them use guilt or pity to worm their way back into my life. That Christmas with Kelly's family felt like a turning point. For the first time, I realized what it meant to be truly free from the toxicity I had grown up with. I didn't need my family's approval or validation. I had found people who cared about me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. The chaos of my past wasn't going to define me anymore. I had built a new life, and I wasn't looking back. By June, I felt good about how far I had come. Life was stable. My relationship with Kelly was growing stronger every day, and my family had become nothing but a distant memory. I had cut ties with all of them, ignoring every half-hearted attempt to reconnect and focusing entirely on my own well-being. But, of course, they weren't finished with me. One Saturday morning, as I was preparing for a run, I heard a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I peered through the peephole, I froze. It was Jane. I hadn't seen her in over a year, and for a split second, I thought about pretending I wasn't home. But I eventually opened the door, and as soon as she saw me, she burst into tears. Logan, I'm so sorry, she sobbed, stepping into the hallway before I even had the chance to invite her inside. I should have stood up for you more. I should have done more. Her apology caught me off guard. For so long, Jane had been this passive figure in my life, someone who never directly hurt me but never stood up for me, either. To hear her take responsibility was unexpected, and I didn't know how to respond. I cut ties with Chris and Linda, she continued, wiping her eyes. And Mom. I just couldn't take it anymore. I folded my arms and leaned against the doorframe. What do you want, Jane? She hesitated, eyes welling up with more tears. I just want to talk. Dad wants to talk too. Can we meet, please? I should have said no. Every part of me screamed at me to shut the door and move on, but there was something in the way she looked at me, pleading, desperate, that made me pause. Against my better judgment, I agreed. A few days later, we met at a quiet diner on the outskirts of the city. Jane was already sitting there with our dad, Brian. It had been a long time since I'd seen him, since I'd punched him outside Sarah's apartment, and the tension between us was thick. He stood when I approached, offering his hand. I didn't take it. Instead, I sat down across from them and waited for one of them to speak. I'm sorry, my dad said, his voice low, for everything. I should have done more to protect you. I should have handled things differently. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd expected. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe things could be salvaged. But then the door to the diner opened, and my mom walked in. I tensed immediately. Brian had the decency to look embarrassed. She wanted to come, he said, as if that explained anything. And of course, right behind her were Chris and Linda. I stood up, ready to leave, but Jane grabbed my arm. Please, Logan, just hear them out. That was it. I stood up, cutting my mom off before she even had the chance to speak. You're not my family anymore, I said, my voice cold. If you want forgiveness, find someone else to manipulate. I'm done. I looked at Jane and said, Jane, what you did was pathetic and downright evil. And you proved that this family is full of manipulators and scumbags. You guys cannot be trusted, ever again. You guys are dead to me, and next time if any of you try to contact me, I will file for a restraining order. I threw some cash on the table for my coffee and walked out, ignoring the voices calling after me. That was the moment I knew there was no turning back. They could beg, plead, and cry all they wanted, but I was done being the scapegoat for their dysfunction. Now, at 28, I feel like I've lived several lifetimes since my family's chaos unfolded. Looking back, it almost doesn't seem real, like it happened to someone else. But the scars are a constant reminder that it was all too real. The good news is that I've come out stronger, wiser, and surrounded by people who actually care about me. Kelly and I got engaged last year. It wasn't anything fancy, just the two of us at our favorite park in Pittsburgh. I didn't go for some grand gesture because I'd learned that real love doesn't need one. When I asked her to marry me, she cried and immediately said yes. That moment felt like the final piece of the puzzle I've been trying to solve since everything fell apart. She's not just my fiancée. She's my partner in every sense of the word. She's supported me through all the ups and downs, listened without judgment, and never once tried to push me back toward the family I left behind. With her, I feel safe in a way I never thought possible. The biggest news, though, we're expecting our first child, a boy. Every time I think about holding him for the first time, I get this overwhelming mix of excitement and nervousness. I never thought I'd be ready for fatherhood, especially after the chaotic mess I grew up in. But Kelly's confidence in us gives me hope. I truly believe we're going to do everything we can to give our son a life filled with love, respect, and stability, the kind of life I never had. One of the first steps I took toward fully severing ties with my family was changing my last name. I didn't rush into it. For a long time, I hesitated, thinking it might be too extreme or that it wouldn't really change anything. But as time passed, I realized that my last name felt like an anchor to my painful past, and I was ready to let it go. It was a strange feeling standing in the courthouse, filling out the paperwork. When the judge signed off on it, I felt a wave of relief, like I had finally closed a door I had been too afraid to shut before. I chose a last name that felt meaningful to me, one tied to a personal hero rather than my family tree. Kelly was fully supportive of my decision. She even joked that she'd take my new last name once we're married, saying, "We're starting our own legacy now." That really stuck with me. The idea of creating something new, something separate from all the pain and betrayal, became my focus. Since I cut ties with my family, I've heard bits and pieces of what's been going on with them, not because I seek it out, but because mutual acquaintances sometimes slip up and mention it. Apparently, my parents are officially separated now. My dad is living in a small rental on the outskirts of town, while my mom is still in the family house, trying to maintain appearances. As for Chris and Linda, well, karma hasn't been kind to them. They're drowning in debt, and from what I hear, their marriage is on shaky ground. Linda lost her job, and Chris's work situation isn't stable either. The irony isn't lost on me. After everything they did to tear me down, they're the ones struggling to stay afloat. Jane isn't faring much better. Her fiancé left her a few months before their wedding. I don't know the details, and honestly, I don't care. She made her choice to stand by Chris and Linda when it mattered most, and that's something I can't forgive. The last time I heard from any of them directly was over a year ago, when my mom sent me another letter begging me to reconnect. I didn't even open it. I tossed it straight in the trash. Whatever regret they feel now is their burden to carry, not mine. One of the biggest lessons I've learned through all of this is the importance of setting boundaries. For so long, I let my family guilt trip me into forgiving them and made me feel responsible for their problems. Cutting them off wasn't easy. It was messy, but it was the only way for me to truly move forward. Sometimes, I wonder if my family ever looks back and regrets their choices. Do they think about the pain they caused? Do they realize how much they lost by betraying me? I'll probably never know, and that's okay. Their regret, or lack of it, doesn't matter anymore. What matters now is that I've finally found peace. It's not easy to walk away from toxic relationships, especially when they're with family. But sometimes, it's the only way to protect your peace and create the life you deserve. You're not obligated to keep people in your life just because you share DNA. Family isn't about blood. It's about the people who show up for you, support you, and love you unconditionally. With Kelly by my side and our little one on the way, I finally have the family I've always wanted.